Good evening. Let me call to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Helena for Tuesday, May 8th. And we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And would our City Manager lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. The Vice Mayor will not be with us this evening due to the after effects of successful knee surgery.
Mayor Galbraith.
Here.
Councilmember Doring.
Here.
Ellsworth.
Here.
Koberstein. Here.
Public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters not on our agenda this evening. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? Public forum is limited to 3 minutes. All right. Mr. Kolianidis?
George Kalianidis, Calistoga.
Yes.
2 things. I want to announce that tomorrow at 6:30 at the Native Sons, we have a forum on Measure D.
All right.
Everybody is invited. The second issue is, and because this issue is going to be with all of us for many years to come, is about tourism, what's happening with over-tourism in many parts of the world. And I prepared the documents which I'm going to submit. But the Guardian of London has reports on what's going on in Amsterdam, Barcelona, Venice, Rome, Dubrovnik, where they have large demonstrations with banners which actually even contain offensive language. Tourists go home with pretty bad words. And I experienced the same thing last year when I was in Lisbon. So I will hand this to for the record. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any further public comment at public forum? All right, I'll close public forum. The next item on our agenda is reports by staff and City Council. Let me begin with the City Manager.
Just a brief update on the SHAPE Committee. There will not be a meeting this Wednesday. However, they are adding a meeting next Wednesday, 1 p.m. in the afternoon in this room, Vintage Hall, followed by their regularly scheduled Wednesday meeting at 6:30 in this room.
I'm not sure I quite caught that. There will not be a meeting.
No meeting tomorrow night.
All right.
There will be an additional meeting next Monday night. Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock at Vintage Hall. And then they will resume meeting again on Wednesday, the 16th, at 6:30 in this room.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown? Ms. Mitz?
Just a reminder that tomorrow is our budget workshop where we will be presenting the draft budget, and it's available online.
All right. Mr. Fopoulos?
Just a reminder, I am recruiting for boards, commissions, and committee applicants. So if anybody would like to apply, please let me know, or information's on our website.
All right. Mr. Hausch? Ms. Smithies?
I just want to announce that Bike to Work Day and School Day is this Thursday, May 10th, and the city is sponsoring Energizer Station at Carnegie Hall. We also have volunteer policemen helping us at probably Olive and Valley View to help ensure safe crossings of students and those who wish to bike to work. In addition, on Thursday, June 7th, there's a bicycle workshop for businesses and wineries and industries in the Upper Valley to help ensure safe riding of our visitors to our valley. It's going to be held at 1360 Oak Avenue, St. Helena, and it's a workshop for hospitality and wine industry, but more probably welcome. So there's information. They'd like an RSVP by May 31st at napabike.org. So for those who are interested in attending that, or businesses that are interested in learning more about it. In addition, a new pedestrian barrier occurred up on Hunt at Main Street on both sides of the crosswalk on the north side of Hunt. It's a temporary, permanent repair until Caltrans can come back in and properly reinstall the sidewalk and curb ramps on the north side of Hunt and the crosswalks. So,
and would you give us the Caltrans definition of the word temporary?
I'm hoping to have an updated schedule on the permanent repairs shortly. We were notified last Wednesday that they were going to do the work immediately, the day in advance of the work, but that they are up. They're more secure than the 2x4 barrier that was installed.
Oh, this is a very
previously.
secure barrier, no question about it. That's why I'm anxious for it to be strictly temporary in the Webster Dictionary sense.
Correct. I'm with you.
All right. Let's see. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Ms. Koberstein?
Yeah, I have something. I want to take a moment to extend a public thank you to our Public Works Director, Erica. We all know she has a lot of capital improvement projects on her plate. Nonetheless, whenever I've shot her an email or posed a question, she always responds. And a couple of months ago, my friend Valley Farrell contacted me to ask if there was anything the city could do to facilitate installation of audible crosswalk signals in St. Helena. Valley and her friend Jan Mullen, both of whom are visually impaired, had contacted Caltrans to try to get audible crossing signals installed at Adams and Pope Street. When Valley contacted me, I simply turned to Erica, and together with Mark, and through coordination with Caltrans, Erica found a way to make this happen. So as a result, sometime after May 20th, hopefully during Public Works Week, Caltrans will install audible crossing signals not only at Adams and Pope, but I think also at Madrona. Are they going to do Madrona and Grayson?
We're going to supply the materials for those two intersections.
Right, all four. Thomas Kwok at Caltrans has promised to give us some advance notice so we can arrange for a small celebration of this collaborative effort, and hopefully for Valley and Jan, together with Jan's guide dog Babe, to be the first to cross the street. So it's not our biggest or our most expensive public works project, but it's important as any. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you indeed. Mr. Ellsworth?
Yeah, I've got a few things. It's come up regarding the noise ordinance that the wine train has numerous more trains now than they have had in the past, and there's a lot of whistleblowing. And so it's been mentioned to me if there's a way to bring it up and agendize it, if there's any support for a discussion about we know that there's other areas that have trains that have quieter or ways to have a quieter situation. So it's something I'd like to see on the agenda at some point. Coming up on May 17th, Napa Water Symposium at Napa Valley College, co-sponsored by the Susquehanna Intertribal Council. This is going to be bring a spotlight to Napa County water issues. People from and organizations from around the Bay Area and Sacramento will be there, and we'll discuss watershed issues and how our issues here affect them, and vice versa, so that we all start working together on our water security and water issues. I'm also working with a few groups on a forum for later in the summer on labor practices in Napa County, discussing minimum wage issues, farm worker wage, and overtime issues. So we'll have more information on that, probably going to happen in August. Finally, I want to address, it was in the newspaper this morning about the fire department, or yesterday, about the fire department meeting we had the other day, where it's sort of been identified that we may be at a point where we're needing to move into new direction in terms of getting some professional element in our fire department. As it was reported in the newspaper that cracks were showing in the fire department, and I sort of look at it like deferred maintenance, that we're responsible for good management so that we don't have deferred maintenance problems. So just as with the buildings that we've identified that had deferred maintenance through the SHAPE committee, the earlier on we identify problems, the better off we are. So So I think it's incumbent upon us as a council and staff to identify where cracks could occur before they occur. Fortunately, I think the city's in a better financial state, so we can address this before it becomes critical. I think we're going to be talking about it at the budget tomorrow, so I think we can move quickly to address the situation. But I just wanted to say that it's our job up here on the council and staff to identify problems before they occur. One other point I want to say that I believe sort of offsets this. I'm going to bring this up at the budget meeting tomorrow, but I want to say it tonight so that if anybody's watching the city council meeting. Last year at this time, if you look at the annual financial reports, it says that our land values in St. Helena are worth about $8 million, our city land values. With the SHAPE Committee reassessment, we found that at least 8 buildings combined equal $25 million. So in the last year, we've identified $17 million worth of assets that we didn't understand last year. So we're moving towards a place where we really understand what our assets and the value we have here. That's our town. That's your town. We all have the right to know what our assets are, what the value is. So I'm just pointing that out, that in conjunction with news about things like the fire department needing to be addressed, we also are finding that the town has assets that we can use to start addressing these issues. Thank you.
Storing.
Nothing on this end. I'll pass tonight.
I don't have anything. I do think in the past we've addressed the quiet zone issue, but I have no difficulty with a council discussion down the road with respect to it, beginning with the CPUC regulations that deal with quiet zones.
I'm happy to join in that request. I would say a general sort of get up to speed with the wine train, various issues that are coming to us would be helpful. Maybe even having someone from the wine train tell us what they're doing in advance of doing it.
Okay. That takes us then to presentations and public recognitions. I think I need a big swallow of water before we start in on this process. So we have 4 proclamations. And the first one is National Travel and Tourism Week. Is there someone here to receive it? Please come on up. Yeah, come on up. And you'll have a chance to say a few words once I've read the proclamation. Okay? So, National Travel and Tourism Week. Whereas the city of St. Helena is a place of great charm that attracts visitors from around the world. Whereas visitors coming to the city of St. Helena enjoy its shops, restaurants, tasting rooms, parks, and many other amenities. Whereas visitors overnighting at St. Helena can enjoy accommodations at a wide range of lodging establishments. Whereas leisure travel, which accounts for more than 3/4 of all trips taken in the United States, provides large benefits to travelers' health and wellness, cultural awareness, education, happiness, and relationships. Whereas it is the hardworking people employed in the tourism and hospitality industry who daily dedicate themselves to provide superior customer service and comfort for guests that are at the core of the industry and essential to its success. Whereas the city of St. Helena remains deeply appreciative of the local hospitalities industry's contribution to the firefighting effort last fall, which included providing warm hospitality services to visiting first responders free of charge. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Alan Galbraith, do hereby proclaim May 6 through 12, 2018, as National Travel and Tourism Week in St. Helena, California, and urge residents of Napa County in this special observance with appropriate events to commemorate, congratulate, and celebrate the people in tourism and hospitality. Dated May 8, 2018.
Thank you very much.
Good. Colin, introduce yourself and
All right.
and say just a few words if you like.
All right. Do you want to say anything? Sure. Okay. Marcel Adderley, General Manager at Southbridge, Napa Valley, and also the Chair of the St. Helena Tourism Improvement District. On behalf of the St. Helena Tourism Improvement District, we thank the Mayor and the Council. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
And I'm Catherine Haywood with Visit Napa Valley, and I'd also like to echo thanks for the recognition of the industry. Also throughout the county, we've had proclamations at every city's jurisdiction, town, the county, the state, and federal level. So we really appreciate the recognition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next proclamation is Mental Health Month 2018. All right. Mental Health Month 2018. Whereas 1 in 4 individuals will experience mental health issues in their lifetimes, which can affect parents, sisters, brothers, spouses, co-workers, and others in our lives, and whereas it is essential to eliminate disparities in mental health by promoting well-being for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, language, place of residence, or age, and ensure equity of access, delivery of services, and improvement of outcomes. And whereas the Mental Health Division seeks to reduce barriers to access, improve community outreach, and engagement that ensures culturally and linguistically competent care to diverse communities through culturally competent services and policies. And whereas while there's still much work to be done to eliminate disparities in services and increase education about mental illness, Napa County service providers are to be commended for their collaborative approach when working with individuals in need. And whereas there's a strong body of research documenting that with support and treatment, between 70 and 90% of individuals with mental illness have a significant reduction in symptoms and improved quality of life. And whereas every Napa County resident can be an ally by learning about and dispelling the myths related to mental illness and eliminating stigma by treating individuals with mental illness with respect. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Alan Galbraith, do hereby proclaim May 2018 as Mental Health Month in the city of St. Helena. As the mayor, I also call upon the citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in St. Helena to recommit ourselves and our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, to supporting our community members so that they can take action to protect their mental health, and to promoting appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental health conditions, dated May 8th, 2018. And if you would like to introduce yourselves and say a few words, you're more than invited to do so. And here's your proclamation.
Good evening, Mayor Alan Galbraith and honorable members of Santa Helena City Council and audience. My name is Guadalupe Maldonado. I come from Up Valley Family Services, and I have Cristina Viña, who is Family Services Coordinator. Up Valley Family Services are committed to help community become aware of mental health resources and reduce stigma and discrimination on mental health issues. In partnership with Mentis and with funding from the Santa Helena School District, we provide access to mental health therapists for all the schools in Santa Helena. In addition, we provide access to counseling for older adults. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a person who provided healing to those suffering from mental health conditions, Max Hernandez, mental health therapist, passed away on March 26, 2018. He did a lot of work with individuals in the community of Santa Helena, and he will forever be remembered by those being compassionate, dedicated, and joyful. Thank you.
My name is Christina. I'm the Family Services Coordinator here at the Up Valley Family Center in Santa Helena, and I just want to take the time and say thank you.
All right, very good.
My name is Bart Pence, and it's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. I am a therapist with Napa County Mental Health, and as a tribute to Mental Health Awareness Week or Month, I am wearing a lime green ribbon, and I want to encourage all of you to wear one You could pick a ribbon up in your local store and wear one and allow people to ask you, what's that about? And you can tell them 1 in 5 people in our valley have mental health issues, and I support mental health awareness because every mind matters. So thank you for making this proclamation, and it's a pleasure to partner with all of you through all of our partners here in the Valley for all of our residents. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is Bike to Work Day, and I think the Public Works Department is going to accept this one. Is anyone? Oh, we have some bikers. Good. Terrific. Bikers beyond myself here. Okay. All right, Bike to Work Day. Whereas the City of St. Helena is committed to making our community safer and more convenient for bicycle commuters and encouraging increased bicycle use, and whereas the City of St. Helena Bicycle Plan, adopted in 2012, identifies benefits of bicycle ridership, including reduced congestion, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and the public health benefits of active transportation, and whereas riding a bicycle for transportation or recreation is a fun, indoor, funneled way to get around. I'm not sure about the word there. And riding to work just 3 days a week can have significant health benefits, including improved cardiovascular strength and weight loss. And whereas an increasing number of visitors to our community are using bicycles and other active transportation for trips to our local hotels, restaurants, tasting rooms, parks, and open spaces. And whereas programs like Bike to Work Day and Bike to School Day are an important opportunity to both educate and encourage members of our community. And whereas the City of St. Helena prioritizes the safety of all our residents and visitors, encourages both bicycle riders and vehicle drivers to share the road and be respectful of other road users. And whereas the City of St. Helena is proud to be hosting an Energizer station on the morning of Bike to Work and School Day, and whereas the City of St. Helena encourages anyone to participate in Bike Work and School Day on May 10 and to consider bicycling for short trips more often, now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Galbraith, on behalf of the entire City of St. Helena, do hereby proclaim the month of May as Bike Month and Thursday, May 10th, 2018 is Bike to Work Day in the City of St. Helena. Good. So let me give you the proclamation, and by all means, that's
My name's Madeline Oliver from the Napa County Bicycle Coalition, and thank you for supporting Bike Month and Bike to Work Day, and hopefully one day our valley, everybody in our valley will feel safe to bike to the coffee shop or the grocery store or to work, and yeah, events like this support that, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The last one is Lupus Awareness Month. Is there anyone here to receive this proclamation? All right. Let me read it in any event. Lupus Awareness Month. And I think this is the first time we've read this one since I've been mayor. So it's an important one. Whereas more than 5 million people worldwide suffer from the devastating effects of lupus, and each year another 100,000 men, women, and children will be diagnosed with this disease, and it's 2 to 3 times more prevalent among people of color, including African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, and Native Americans. And whereas lupus is a chronic autoimmune disease that causes inflammation of various parts of the body, particularly the skin, heart, joints, and kidneys, and whereas lupus research shows that 1.5 million Americans have been diagnosed with lupus, which takes and strikes women about 9 times more frequently than it does men, and whereas while lupus is not infectious, rare, or cancerous, it affects more people than cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, sickle cell anemia, and cystic fibrosis combined. And whereas although lupus ranges from mild to life-threatening, and thousands of Americans who have lupus die each year, the majority of cases can be managed with proper treatment. And whereas existing public information programs about lupus in California remain inadequately disseminated and insufficient in addressing the needs of specific diverse populations and other undeserved groups. And whereas the Lupus Foundation of Northern California, serving California from Santa Cruz to the Oregon border, was founded as a nonprofit organization to alleviate suffering for lupus patients through patient and family services, achieve early dedication of undiagnosed cases through awareness, promotion, and achieve the eradication of lupus by supporting lupus research, and whereas increased public awareness, education, research are the key to winning the battle against lupus, now therefore be it resolved that by Mayor Alan Galbraith that he recognize May 2018 as Lupus Awareness Month and extends heartfelt wishes to the Lupus Foundation of Northern California for success in their core objectives in the future. Dated May 8th, 2018. So thanks everybody for listening. Okay. Reorient that. Next item, staff briefing, we have none. The next item is our consent calendar. And before I ask for a motion to move the consent calendar, just a couple of quick comments as requested by the city clerk, and that is that with respect to 8.4, there's an updated amendment. It came from the county, but the only update relates to formatting, as I understand it. And then with respect to 8.7, state law requires that I read the entry. I suspect the motivation by state law is to get across to everybody that we're dealing with compensation issues, and everybody hears it. So 8.7, consideration and proposed approval resolution approving a Fourth Amendment to the Unrepresented Compensation Program and authorizing and approving publicly available pay schedules in accordance with the requirement of California Code of Regulations, Title II, Section 570.5, which includes revised salary schedules to include a 3.5% COLA effective July 1st, 2018 to all mid-managers of the Unrepresented Compensation Program and a 3.5% COLA to the following executive department heads: City Clerk, Fire Chief, Finance Director, Human Resources and Information Director, Library Director, Planning and Community Improvement Director, Police Chief, Public Works Director, and Recreation Director. So at this point...
I'd like to pull 8.3 for some brief comments.
All right. Is there any other... does any member of the public wish to pull any item? So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to...
Wait.
Yes?
Mayor, in regards, just a quick question in regards to 8.5, payments of $40,000 for the fireworks.
Well, we'll pull that one and take your question at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve 8.1, 8.2, 8.4, 8.6, 8.7, and 8.8.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. That takes us back to 8.3. Mr. Ellsworth, did you have an issue?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up. This is an item that I'm very pleased to see here. We've been waiting for this since the unfortunate FEMA issues from 2009 to 2014. This is the fraud prevention policy, and this is going to be put in place. One of the statements in the purpose says it is incumbent upon the City Council and City Management to institute and clearly communicate the fraud prevention policy to both internal and external stakeholders. So I thought it was important to pull this off the consent calendar to let everybody know that this is being implemented in the city now. So we have a way to define fraud and also have procedures in place for anybody in the city who recognizes it to report it and deal with it. I'm going to quickly read a definition, and then I have a question. So the definition, fraud is defined as an intentional deception.
Can you tell us what page you're on?
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. This is page 29 of 490.
Okay, yeah, I'm right there, yes.
So it says, fraud is defined as an intentional deception, misappropriation of resources, or the manipulation of data to the advantage or disadvantage of a person or entity. So it says some examples of fraud include, and I want to go down to the second one, misappropriation of the city's assets. says funds, supplies, furniture, equipment, etc. What I'm wondering is if we can include water as part of that. It's a commodity that the city sells, and so it's tied to our fiscal system. I don't know if this is the place to have that, or if when we discuss our water security procedures, we would have a second fraud policy in that arena. But I just wanted to bring that up because I think that water is this is a second business the city runs, and how we also make sure that is covered by the fraud policy as well. We don't have to figure it out tonight, but I just want to bring it up.
Okay. These policies are policies that govern city employees, right?
I can respond. It governs city employees and also the city council, planning commission, any boards and commissions the city has. Maybe one item to maybe clarify, it does say misappropriation of city assets, and it's funds, supplies, furniture, equipment, et cetera. So it is not, that list isn't encompassing of anything. So I feel like it is generally written where it could potentially be incorporated if the city attorney would concur with that.
I agree. All right. Any further discussion? Any public comment?
I have a question.
Sure.
I know this is directed at employees and the council and the like, but it also notes that concerns about fraudulent activity or allegations often come from the public. And it's not clear to me how, if that is brought to someone's attention, does it just go up the ladder here if it's brought, say, to a department head, or how does a member of the public bring it to someone's attention, or is this not appropriate in this particular policy?
No, it would definitely be appropriate in this particular policy. We left it very general because if, let's say for some reason it's a department head that somebody might be thinking that there's fraudulent activity, they could go to the city manager if they're not comfortable with the city manager going to a city council member. So the same would be appropriate for any citizen or any resident, where they could go to the most appropriate person they feel, and then from there we can work through the investigation.
Yeah, I'd suggest maybe they report to the city manager if they suspect something. And my other question is on page 31 under section C. The last paragraph says that contractual agreements with the city may contain provisions prohibiting fraudulent or corruptive acts and may include information about reporting fraud and corruption. Is there a reason that's not shall or mandatory, that we would put those in all contractual agreements with the city?
We can definitely add it to our contractual agreements. There are some times where we use other people's contractual agreements, and so what we typically do is we will go back and forth between our department, our city attorney, their department, their attorneys, and so we can definitely make that a standard in our contractual agreements and also push to have it in others. Sometimes we can't require that for another agreement.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful because we do note in here that sometimes this involves the actions of contractors or some of our vendors or partners, and it's just a suggestion.
And this also pertains to appointed bodies of the city council, subcommittees, et cetera, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're covered.
It also covers city vendors, customers, and partners.
Yeah, to me, with respect to C, I would leave it the way it is. May, the city, in its standard contract, can and should have an anti-fraud position, but as was said, it may be that at times we're not using our contract, we're using somebody else's contract, and there are very severe civil penalties for fraud in any event.
I don't see why anybody we're contracting with would have a pushback if we were trying to include a fraud policy. It seems...
Well. City Attorney, have any insight on this one?
No, I think that I don't think that there's any. I know that there is no legal prohibition against including this. The sort of the practical part of me says I like to include as much flexibility as possible, such that when staff is trying to negotiate contracts and someone proposes something or says that for whatever reason they can't do it, that staff then has the flexibility to modify the contract. But I think, as Councilmember Koberstein said, it's hard to envision a person saying that they wouldn't comply with these provisions.
All right. So, is it the sense of the council change may to shall?
For me, yes. In my opinion.
Yeah, there's two places. Well, the first one for sure.
See whether Mr. Doring is.
Well, from my perspective, I don't think it adds any value if you're going to court against somebody who's committed fraud against the city. It doesn't really matter. I think, frankly, I'd rather have them know that we have a policy. Maybe that's the better thing, that in our contract we just note that they should be aware of the city council's fraud policy and leave it at that. That would be, in my mind, more meaningful.
There are, I think as Councilmember Doring intuited, there are existing provisions in the law that preclude fraud and in government contract, in the implementation of government contracts. So I don't think that adding this gives you a whole lot of additional pop, but there's certainly no downside to it.
Public comment?
Is there any public comment at this point?
I'm Bobby Monette. I'm speaking as a citizen. This applies to workers as well as vendors, right? So the shall might be important to have for that reason too. But that's not what my question was. And I'm sorry to say I didn't read the staff report, so my apologies if it's already covered in the staff report. But what are whistleblower protections? Does the city have those somewhere in this policy or someplace else in case people are blowing the whistle on someone else, either employees or members of commissions or committees?
I haven't personally reviewed to see whether the city has whistleblower protection built into any of its own policies, but there are ample whistleblower protections under state law for employees.
Well, I'm not sure. It might be worth having some guidelines in our city documents.
Thank you very much. Aren't whistleblower protections at some point going to be in the employee manual when it's revised?
I will have to verify. I believe it does address it to a certain degree where it talks about that there are no unintended consequences go against the person who actually turns someone in. The policy itself, it doesn't specifically say whistleblower. It does address confidentiality, and it says as much as the extent as we can. Sometimes there might be an investigation similar to a personnel action where we are doing an investigation and we try to maintain confidentiality, but sometimes we can't do full confidentiality because of the nature of the investigation. So it loosely addresses the confidentiality on here, but I feel like our handbook does talk about no repercussions can come out of a whistleblowing situation.
Well, but the handbook is going to be under further revision, so
Correct.
We can take a look at. That's the context to me of where that should be addressed.
I just want to note, Mayor, that in this provision on page 31, there is a paragraph that begins in this manner: retaliation and retribution will not be tolerated against any employee who reports suspected fraudulent or corrupt activities. All reports will be taken seriously and will be investigated by appropriate staff or legal counsel. If deemed necessary, the city will notify and fully cooperate with the appropriate law enforcement agency. Any investigation resulting in the finding of fraud or corruption will be reported to the city council.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. All right. So where do we stand here at this point? Are you prepared to go with the policy as written? Do you insist on the word shall instead of may? We can.
Well, how about if we say, shall contain references to this policy? I mean, I'd like to put people on notice that we have the policy.
Well, how about just shall contain appropriate references to our policy provisions prohibiting, et cetera?
That's fine.
Fine.
Yep.
So, shall contain appropriate references to our policy provisions prohibiting fraudulent or corrupt acts. So, with that change, is there a motion to approve?
Move approval with the change.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay, that takes us to 8.5, excuse me. And there we had a public comment. This relates to the Valley Fireworks contract. Yeah, please.
Good evening, Council.Cio Perez. This may may just be an edit to the year that is specified in this portion. It's talking about 2017 and not 2018. Now, if you guys are approving something that was done that long ago, I think there's a problem with the process. If this is for this coming year, I think it's appropriate to discuss it now. So that's the only change I would recommend.
All right. I think it's hard to disagree with that one. So we need to change 217 to 218 here on the agenda, and any corresponding changes in the backup documents. But with that, is there a motion to approve 8.5?
So moved.
Second. I'll second it. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
All right. That gets us through the consent calendar. That takes us to public hearings. And the first one is 9.1, consideration approval resolution amending the appropriations limit for FY 2017-2018. I think that goes to Ms. Mitz.
Yes, thank you. This particular item is amending the appropriations limit that was set by City Council for this current fiscal year that we're in. We typically set what is otherwise known as the GAN limit right after the budget has been adopted. Staff did notice that there was an error in the appropriations limit that we have. Our calculation that was approved by Council on June 27, 2017, the carryover amount from the previous fiscal year was used, fiscal year 15-16 was used instead of 16-17. So what that means is the amended appropriations will be $48,768,534 rather than the $45,720,764 that was approved by City Council. This does not have a fiscal impact on the City of St. Helena. The fiscal year 17-18 budget is 76.24% below the appropriations limit, so we have plenty of wiggle room. So staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a resolution amending the appropriation limit for 2017 to 2018.
Is there any public comment with respect to this most technical item? All right. Any council comment? The chair would entertain a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. That takes us to 10.2, introduction of conceptual countywide workforce housing.
What about 10.1?
Did I miss? Oh, you're right. Thank you. 10.1, update on City Council, stabilize, maintain, improve access to housing goal. 10.1. And there's a staff report. And
thank you, Mayor.
All right.
One of the city's five 3-year goals is to stabilize, maintain, and improve access to housing, and to help identify and organize strategies to address this goal. I didn't need a rerun on that one, did I? Obviously, the staff report, the person that wrote this, me, changed some words. So the city hired Erica Sklar to help prepare a white paper on community housing needs, constraints, and solutions. And we have a working group consisting of Vice Mayor White, Councilmember Coberstein, and myself. And the initial draft of this white paper is nearing completion, and tonight we wanted to invite Erica to provide you an overview of some high-level findings and she'll walk through a brief PowerPoint for you. And here's Erica.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hi.
Nice to have you back.
Okay, so this is an update on the city's housing goal. All right, so the study that was requested addresses the 3-year goal to stabilize, maintain, and improve access to housing. It also addresses the city's 2016 mission statement, and I have an excerpt here. The City of St. Helena is dedicated to serving the needs and desires of its citizens by encouraging a wide range of innovative, well-designed housing available to residents of all ages and income levels. So to start, I identified and analyzed demographic trends in St. Helena and Napa County, focusing on the contributing factors to St. Helena's housing challenge and their effect on the community. In the report that will follow later, I will give some detail about the strategies and prioritizing of these strategies that were used by other communities who have had similar issues. So I will go over very briefly in this report some of these strategies that have worked well in other communities, but I won't go over in a lot of detail, both the funding sources that have been successful, regulatory changes that other communities have used, and also production incentives. So I analyzed census data from 1990, 2000, 2010, and I also used the 2016 data from the 5-year community American Community Survey. So it's clear from the review of the population, housing, and employment data that there is a mismatch between income and housing affordability for both St. Helena residents and St. Helena employees. So St. Helena is losing its middle class. This was a big data point that was not expected. Quantitative data confirms that there's a significant gap in household incomes versus housing costs. There are 2 local jobs for every local worker. Most employees are commuting into St. Helena. So it's no surprise that the type of local employment is changing and fewer St. Helena residents are working in wine, agriculture, and production. Much of the job growth in Napa County is in lower income jobs. The population in St. Helena, in fact, has really not increased. It's remained relatively stable. So there was a slight decrease between 2000 and 2010, and a slight increase in year 2016, but relatively the same. So between 2000 and 2016, St. Helena saw a significant loss of its middle class. The low-income members of our community who earn a lower income, they remained relatively the same. The moderate-income households lost 437 households between that time, and the higher-income residents increased by 490 households. So this is another way to look at that. The loss of the middle-income households are represented in those 3 middle buckets. So those are folks earning between $25,000 and $50,000, $50,000 and $75,000, and there's a typo. It's supposed to be $75,000 and $100,000, but you can see that all of those buckets have shrunk. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is now at $1,809, and that requires an income of approximately $65,000 to afford. The types of folks in our community who make that kind of income would be a restaurant manager, a loan officer, a paralegal. The median cost of home in 2017 ended up being $1 million. And the income needed to afford that kind of sale or purchase would be over $200,000, and that's with over $100,000 down in a down payment. So, looking up the kind of professions that earn over $200,000, not even all doctors or all CEOs earn that much, but there were some. So this means that 36% of residents can't afford our rent, and 70% of our residents cannot afford to purchase. There are twice as many jobs in St. Helena as there are residents in the workforce, and we have seen a decline of local residents in the workforce since 2000. Therefore, most local employees are commuting into town. Fewer of St. Helena residents are working in the wine industry than in 2000. Census data on the 2,681 residents in the workforce show a lower percentage in ag, manufacturing, and services than in 2000, and a larger percentage are now working in other industries. Meanwhile, the wine industry and the hospitality industry are expected to grow in the next 10 years in Napa County. And per a recent report, 40% of jobs in the county pay below $20 an hour, which is about $42,000 per year. Per 2015 data, the mean income or annual incomes for the top 4 industries in Napa County are as follows. For production, $39,000 a year. For sales, $44,000 a year. Service, $27,000 a year, and the farm, $27,000 as well. So, what are our challenges? This analysis of historic and current data confirms that housing production has not kept pace with the job growth and is no longer aligned with the income levels of local employees. So the challenges to our housing affordability in St. Helena fall in these categories. At a community level, there's scarcity of building sites, low density, limited housing options to choose from, and loss of the moderate income households. At an economic level, there's the cost of development. Business growth is challenged without the employees. There's a higher percentage of low-wage jobs. There's a growing impact, obviously, on the moderate income households because they're leaving, and a huge affordability gap. At a government level, there's constraints on infill opportunities. The approval process has barriers. There's enforcement of local preference laws that could challenge our housing enforcement. Growth controls, which we have in this city, and regional constraints. And finally, at a financial level, there's the cost of development of housing, which is very high, competitive and complex state and federal subsidies. The funding is uncertain, and there's a lack of funding for diversity of housing types. So there's more subsidy sources available for some low-income rental, and then obviously for the high, the developers who are coming in and doing the expensive homes. But those moderate and diverse housing types in the middle have a challenge when trying to attract funding. So, the effects of these findings on our community. After years of relative continuity, St. Helena is experiencing significant changes, and that challenges our thriving community. The loss of the middle class, the increase in our very high and low income residents, the decline in diversity, and the shift in the job market affects housing, but it also affects education, the number of students that are enrolled in our schools, the traffic, our local ag and other businesses, as well as civic engagement. Are there lessons to be learned from other high-cost markets around the country? Yes, there are approaches that have been adopted by other high-cost jurisdictions that diversify and increase their supply of housing. Any effort will require additional subsidies from the city, however. The city will need a revenue source that is consistent and reliable. Additionally, regulatory changes are needed to support housing that is appropriate for a diverse set of life stages and income levels. There's I know it's hard to read. This is really just a snapshot of the key mechanisms for raising funds that we are seeing other communities are using with some success. And so in this draft report that will come out, these will be outlined in more detail. Additionally, we added this slide, opportunities to lower housing costs. Again, it's a snapshot. These are all subject areas that will be fleshed out in the report that's coming. So next steps. I look forward to sharing the draft white paper with you for your review and working with you to collect public input. It's in its final form. It should be a roadmap for future action. The next steps include publishing and discussing this white paper, its findings, convening public engagement workshops for feedback, refining the white paper, and presenting to City Council for action. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So this is really a preliminary report with a lot of work still to go. Is there any public comment at this point, or can we let Erica get back to work?
2 years ago, George Kalianides, 2 years ago,
What was that?
we had organized a forum on tourism, and professor from Massachusetts said that Napa County is no longer an agricultural economy, it is a tourist economy. And 2008 is actually a seminal year because the definition of agriculture changed, and tourist economies around the world have these unintended consequences that Erica actually highlighted. That's the reality of it. You go to tourism and you get high disparity in income distribution. Mm-hmm. You get low-paying jobs because they're the lowest-paying industries in the world. So now we are living with the consequences, and I'm curious to see what the solutions are. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any further public comment? All right. I'll close public comment. Is there any council discussion at this point? There's obviously a lot more to come. My only quick observation would be, are you familiar with the NVTA issued a short report dated May 2, and it talks in broad terms about these same problems from a congestion management point of view. So there we are.
My comment is just to say thank you for working on this and pushing it forward, and you use the word action, and I think that's if we can create the strategy, then we can begin implementing it, and I don't think it's too late to deal with it, but we have to deal with it now, so it's appreciated that you're working on this, so thank you.
Any further comment?
I just have a couple of comments. I want to thank Erica. This has been a really thorough work product, and I've enjoyed working with you. I think if we, follow our roadmap of what we're doing for the next couple of years under this goal, where we will go is to identify things that we can do in the near term quickly, whether they're legislative or we begin to earmark revenue or increase revenue by perhaps revising our inclusionary housing formulas. And then there are longer-term goals. So it isn't all going to happen overnight, but there are some, I think, fairly significant things that we can start to talk about and do fairly quickly. Which leads me to the second point, which is community engagement. I think we do want to talk as a council about how we are going to engage the community in this work. Some of these things might be legislative actions that we're taking at the council, and it could happen through the public hearing process and giving people information ahead of time so they know what's coming. Some of it may be subject area by subject area workshops where we focus in on one particular thing. I do personally think this is a committee may help, but I think we need a little ad hoc break myself, and it may be a more appropriate way to do this, to go out and have forums in the community, not involving a huge committee of citizens, but to explain some of the findings and talk about some of the solutions. So, I see that later on here we're going to look at recommendations on what our long-term and short-term solutions are, and keep working and roll some of them into next year's work program as well.
Okay. All right, let's see what, go back to the agenda item for just a moment. It's an update, so receive and filed, deem it received and filed, and thank you very much. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right, next one is 10.2. And let me turn to Mr. Prestwich on this one.
Thank you, Mayor. On the related topic of housing, over the past year, Visit Valley Napa has been exploring potential funding mechanisms to address some of the challenges that we just heard about with respect to workforce housing. And the region's lodging industry has participated in these conversations. They obviously employ a significant portion of the workforce, and they desire to be part of that solution. And tonight, we have Catherine Hayward with this from Visit Napa Valley to explain a little bit more about a conceptual countywide workforce housing funding mechanism.
Okay, good. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Catherine Hayward with Visit Napa Valley. So, Visit Napa Valley has been part of affordable and workforce housing conversations for a number of years now. In most recent conversations, in recent months, we've been evaluating different funding mechanisms and sources of funding to address these issues, perhaps unveil some unique funding opportunity we've never thought of before. These conversations are happening with our lodging partners, with other representatives of other visitor-serving industries, with nonprofit housing developers, with housing advocates, members of the community, and also government officials throughout the county. So after exploring several alternatives, under current consideration is a 1% increase in TOT. Now, this would be a special tax, unlike the current 12% TOT, transient occupancy tax, that is collected. This would be specifically designated for housing, workforce affordable housing, or housing that is affordable is what we like to call it. A special tax requires a vote of the people with a 2/3 threshold. So there is interest among the other jurisdictions to pursue and work towards a consolidated ballot measure for November of 2018. So the discussions are ongoing. We do need, however, to move relatively quickly. And as we've just heard, there is a task force already established here in St. Helena. We would like for St. Helena to continue to be a part of this discussion. And what we're seeking is an official appointment of 2 electeds and a city staff member to participate in a work session that will happen next week with the other jurisdictions to talk through some of the potential ordinance issues, the ballot language. This would be a chance for a local solution to a local problem, but on a jurisdiction-wide level. I'm happy to answer any questions. We're extremely encouraged by the feedback that we're getting, the interest and the support. In fact, this morning at the Napa County Board of Supervisors meeting, the effort was highly regarded and appreciated. So again, we welcome the participation and would like to see the discussion pursued further.
Can you advise as to what you're doing in terms of reaching out specifically to the lodging industry here in St. Helena?
Well, we convene a lodging committee every other month. That is a 40-person committee of GMs and owners of lodging properties throughout the county. So that is our forum for making presentations on issues such as this. We've had housing advocates come and present to this group, as well, as other topics of discussion. And then at the board level, this is a regular topic. We also have, as you know, a local TID. So this topic was brought up at the local TID level. And then in addition to that, we provide emails and information through our B2B on what these issues. There is no secret out there about the housing issues, and it stares our lodging partners in the face each time that they have a vacancy on their staff.
No, I appreciate that, because a tax like this that requires 66% is going to require the full backing of the lodging industry up and down the valley. 66% is not easy to achieve on any tax, and that includes a special tax. So I'm delighted to hear that the lodging industry, perhaps out of some degree of self-interest, is pulling itself behind a 1% TOT that's devoted strictly to workforce or affordable housing.
Yes, we understand that we will be very active in the education campaign of this. One thing to note about a consolidated ballot measure, for the county unincorporated area, the entire county populace votes on that particular portion of the measure, and then within their own jurisdiction, they vote. So we know that we will have an education process.
Right. So what you're saying is there are two tax measures on the ballot, which makes it extremely confusing.
Right.
And that's unfortunate, but that just says, hey, the level of effort here and the backing from the industry has to be exceptionally strong if this is going to succeed, I see it.
Sorry. I did invite members of our lodging partners to come and speak on this issue, because I knew you would seek some of that reassurance. Of course, we have a lot of guests checking in at this hour, so it's hard to get people to come and.
I like the idea of a lot of guests checking in too. All right, very good. Does anybody else wish to speak to this issue this evening?
Catherine,
Would you please approach the podium and
Sorry, Randy. You got it.
Introduce yourself and.
Randy Dunn in Anglin. Catherine, what's the projected income revenue from this per year?
So we estimate, if all jurisdictions participate, thank you for asking this question, we estimate $5 million, and that's on an annual basis. The preliminary discussions include the monies earned in those jurisdictions, staying with those jurisdictions for the potential of matching funds that might be available through the county, through the state. There is a state housing bond coming up. So I hope that answers your question.
Correct. All right. Any further public comment? Thank you very much.
I think we have.
Oh, yes.
Mary Stevenson, representing our town, St. Helena. And just two comments for stuff from before. Christina Avina, who was the second person who came up to thank you for the Proclamation for Mental Health, is one of our participants in the self-help housing program. She, her husband, and her two children. She's a counselor at the Family Center. So I thought you'd want to know that. And secondly, I'm amazed that no one had a comment on the fact that 41% of our middle-income residents have left the Valley in the last 6 years. I think that's just phenomenal, and I'm surprised that there was no discussion on that. But to a more positive thing, I think Catherine and Visit Napa Valley for putting this together, and we have been scratching our heads, using our brains, trying to figure out for years how we can have tourists contribute more to the quality of life of the residents of Napa Valley, because the tourists are the ones who are not only our lifeblood, but they're the ones who are making it more difficult for us to buy houses and get from here to there and that sort of thing. And this kind of countywide tax is something that will really could help that tremendously. From our town standpoint, we hope that the city will at least be a part of this discussion process with Visit Napa Valley and the other jurisdictions. And, of course, our big concern, like I'm sure all of you are, is how much money the St. Helena get based on the fact that we don't have as many hotels as everyone else, but we still bear the burden of the tourists. But I really hope that you will consider investigating this further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment?
Good evening again, Mayor and Council members. Marcel, Southbridge, Napa Valley. I just want to applaud and thank Catherine and Visit Napa Valley for putting this on the books. It's a remarkable effort, and certainly we couldn't have had a better segue from Erica of why we need to do this, why we need to have this tax, which our visitors will be paying to support our staff members. So thank you for any and all consideration.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment?
Thank you, Mike Hackett from Angwin. I've watched this issue for quite a while, and I've often just wondered if instead of adding 1% more in tax, why don't we just take 1% of what's already collected and share it, instead of giving it all to exercise our freedom to invite people in. Why don't we use it specifically for affordable housing? Just an idea. Instead of raising a tax, use some of it and share more of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, let me close public comment. Let me note that I've been participated in a discussion with other mayors with respect to this issue. As was stated, there's a meeting next week. Is it next Wednesday? Next Thursday, where it is two city council members are sought to attend the meeting. Obviously, we have the committee, but Mr. White is not available to do that. And my suggestion would be that Ms. Koberstein and myself go to the meeting. I think they do expect one of the folks coming from the city council to be a mayor. So that would be my suggestion, if that's okay with the council. And it's specifically to discuss the ins and outs, which are not simple, sadly, of pushing forward with this tax on the November ballot. Does that meet with the consensus of the council? Can you do it next?
Yeah, I think
okay.
I got some kind of invitation.
You did, yes. I recall that you did. All right, so that would be Ms. Koberstein and myself would make the meeting next Thursday. And then the only other point that I would make is that while the 1% for us is, just in terms of dollars, is not great, it's probably $260,000 or so. Nevertheless, it's not trivial with respect to the county, and the county has every incentive to try and put more housing in the city. So some of what goes to the county, I'm sure, is going to be made available to the city, not legally, but just the way they, just in the same sense that the county undertook to help us with respect to the last tranche of the Turley loan.
I have a comment. I think it's good that this discussion is occurring. I think it would be nice if some of what is already being collected could be put towards housing. I will say, when we started this work on the white paper with Erica, one of the first things we talked about was TOT revenue, and whether we ourselves should consider raising the rate in St. Helena, or earmarking a certain part of it, or perhaps earmarking short-term rental, TOT. And this is we're going to have to face fairly quickly whether to join in this ballot measure or not. And I think there are a lot of issues about local control that we should look at. I'm not saying I'm opposed to what the county is doing, but I think we really, in short order, are going to have to determine whether this is something we want to tackle on our own and maintain the flexibility and control over the funds. So that'll be one of the first white paper topics we'll probably deal with.
Well, I'm sure this will be a discussion next Thursday, too. And again, my understanding is that as a municipality, to impose that tax on our lodging industry, the initiative must come from us. The countywide tax would be collected by the county, but only from lodging establishments in the county, not in the city. Unfortunately, they need to get the votes of the folks in the city to support the countywide tax. There's no way to confine the vote, as I understand it, there's no way to confine the vote for the county tax just to residents in the unincorporated county. That's why you need two measures, and it's a complicated problem.
The city might have its own measure.
Perhaps, the city would have to have its own measure.
If we join in this effort, we may decide to do our own independent measure, perhaps a different rate. It's all to be discussed. How much money is going to be raised? What's the formula for distributing it? Do we think it's prudent for us to join in a 1% effort, or is there something else we want to do?
All right.
I've got a comment.
Sure.
And I probably should have made this comment when we were discussing the first issue because Erica was here. But I think what we're looking at with housing in St. Helena is also related to the county and the county's practices and what the county's approving. If we continue approving entities that do nothing but bring in low-wage jobs, we're creating a problem where we need more housing to serve something that we're just up-spiraling. We have some constraints. We have two-lane roads in town that feed our town. We have water constraints. We have to balance those and be communicating with the county as well. County policy, continuing to approve commercial entities that need workers that can't afford to live here is not sustainable. And yes, we're looking at a local problem and we need local solutions, but the other thing to consider is many of the entities that are here profiting from being here are not local. The money goes somewhere else, and it doesn't recirculate in our communities. So there's a balance that includes talking to the county about labor. What are our wages? How do the wages affect whether somebody can live in an area? It's not just housing. We need housing, but we don't want housing to constantly be chasing approvals of large entities that need more workers. We'll never catch up, and we'll have freeways, and we'll run out of water. So we've got to figure out that balance. There's more to it than just saying St. Helena needs housing. Yes, we do, but it has to work in balance with everything we're doing in the county.
All right. Any further discussion? Let's see. Give me a second here to see where we are. So I think the only issue where we needed to take some action was with respect to the appointments for the meeting next Thursday, and we've agreed that it should be Ms. Culberstein and myself. So we can move on to 10.3, which is discussion and consideration of city position on June 2018 ballot measures. And let me turn to Mr. Prestwich, but to me we should be taking these up one at a time.
That was my plan as well.
Discussion.
That was my plan as well, Mayor. In just under a month, on June 5th, California will hold its primary election, and the election will include both state and local measures of interest to St. Helena residents. And tonight, there are 5 measures that we've included in this report for review. Those are State Propositions 68 and 69, Regional Measure 3, and Napa County Measures C and D. The council tonight may desire to support, oppose, remain neutral, or take no position on the measures. The report includes a lot of material, including, in I think most cases, ballot text, also impartial analyses, and ballot questions. So there's a lot of informational materials that have been included, and there's an additional handout on Regional Measure 3 that was distributed today as well. So the first measure that we've outlined is Proposition 68. This is the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018, also known as SB 5 from 2017. This is a $4 million bond on the June ballot, and this would fund parks, water, climate, and environmental programs.
Billion.
Did I say million? I'm sorry. And in addition to rehabilitating state and local parks, this would provide funding for climate adaptation projects, water quality and supply projects, and would reallocate $100 million of unused bond authority from prior bond acts for the same purposes. The League of California Cities has requested all California cities support Propositions 68 and 69, and we've included a draft resolution of support should you consider that position. So I'll pause there on Prop 68.
All right. Is there any public comment on Proposition 68? I'll close the public comment on Proposition 68. For myself, I would only say that I've been approached by folks on the county parks district, and they are certainly strongly supportive of Prop 68, and persuaded me to sign a statewide petition in its support, so I'm committed to it. Is there any further discussion? Let me see whether there's a motion to support Prop 68.
And you may want to take public comment one by one on each of these as well.
Okay. Yeah, there was no public comment. Is there a motion to support?
The draft resolution that's in our packet, the materials we received tonight, it's on page 310 and 11, I believe. Yep.
All right, is there a second? I'll second it. Mr. Papoulis?
Councilmember Coperstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
All right, that takes us to Proposition 69.
So Proposition 69 is the motor vehicle fees and taxes, restrictions on expenditures, appropriation limit, also known as ACA 5. What this would do is prohibit the legislature from rating any of the new transportation funds, and ensures that these funds cannot be borrowed or diverted by the legislature and can only be used for transportation purposes.
All right. Is there any public comment on Prop 69? Excuse me. Prop 69. Seeing none, I'll close public comment.
Government at its best.
Any further council discussion? Is there a motion to support Prop 69?
So moved. Second.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coperstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. So that then takes us to Measure C, which is a countywide initiative.
I have Regional Measure 3 next.
Oh, Regional Measure 3. I jumped over that. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ms. Coperstein.
So Regional Measure 3 proposes to increase tolls on Bay Area bridges by $1 in 2019, an additional $1 in 2022, and a third dollar in 2025, for a total increase of $3 by 2025 on those bridges. And after 2025, tolls could be increased for inflation, essentially adjusted for inflation. RM3, Regional Measure 3, will be on the ballot in all 9 Bay Area counties, and to pass, it requires approval by a majority of the votes cast on the measure in all of the 9 counties combined. And just to highlight a couple of the local projects that could be funded with RM3, that includes the Soskel Junction. This is the flyover and roundabout concept at State Route 221 and Soskel Ferry Road. This would include American Canyon State Route 29 multimodal and highway operation improvements, and State Route 29 intersection improvements at Airport, State Route 12 in Carneros.
All right. Is there any public comment on Regional Measure 3? Seeing none, I'll close public comment.
Wait.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, it wasn't fast enough. Let's see. I'm Bobby Monette, and speaking as a citizen, if 69 passes, maybe we can still get those things done. If all the road taxes are done for roads. But the only thing I have against this Regional Measure 3 is that it's a regressive tax, and you can't really discourage people from driving by raising the bridge tolls if they can't get to work any other way. So it just causes me to question whether there might be some other revenue source for what they're wanting to use this stuff for, rather than all the people that have to commute, and there's so many that are commuting from Lodi to Silicon Valley and so forth. So it just seems like a regressive tax to me.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? All right, let me close public comment. Any council discussion? I might say that for myself that I serve on the NVTA board, and certainly I've heard a lot about the potential for this bond issue to benefit projects here in Napa County, which certainly affect us and our ability to move through the county as we must do, including the South County. And so I'm for Regional Measure 3. It's important that these infrastructure improvements be tackled. Any further comment?
I was wondering, Mr. Mayor, do you know whether the funds that would be going to the SR 37 project would be sufficiently met through this measure, or would there still need to be substantial funds? I was hearing talk at one of the meetings a couple months ago at an NBTA meeting that they were thinking that they would need a toll on 37, and I'm wondering, is this in place of that or in conjunction with a potential toll?
I'm not sure I'm the person to answer that. My understanding is that...
Or anybody else who knows.
My understanding is that this would not fully fund that project. Other funds would be required, but it's a very large issue that has to be tackled.
I concur with Ms. Monette about a concern that it is working people who have to cross those bridges and are the ones that have to pay, who have to do it all the time. I do also realize that we have these infrastructure needs, so it's a tough balance, but I do want to recognize that people who may not be able to afford it have to pay it. So,
if you're fortunate enough to use the Golden Gate Bridge, it's not imposed on that bridge.
Right.
It's imposed on the state-owned or operated. I recall a presentation about this at Nicklog a few months ago, the benefits to our local governments through this measure. The information we received that evening swayed me, and I would support this Measure 3.
All right. Any further council comment? Is there a motion? Would you like to make a motion to support Regional Measure 3?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Jofopoulos?
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. All right.
Does this get into a formal resolution, or how do people realize that we've done this?
We can bring Regional Measure 3 back as a formal and place that on the consent calendar at the next meeting, and we will note in the record tonight that was approved.
Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to Measure C. Let me turn again to the city manager.
On Measure C, the language that I'm going to summarize the ballot measure is taken from the impartial analysis. that's included in the report. Measure C proposes to amend the Napa County General Plan and Zoning Ordinance to establish water quality buffer zones on parcels greater than 1 acre within the agricultural watershed AW zoning district, and would limit tree removal, including both oak and non-oak species within those zones. Measure C requires on-site replacement of lost oak trees or oak woodlands, or permanent preservation of comparable habitat. It also establishes an oak removal limit, such as when a cumulative total of 795 acres of oak woodlands are removed from AW zones as measured from September 1, 2017. Further removal of oak woodland would be subject to a permitting process.
All right, let me open public comment. With respect to Measure C, does anybody wish to speak for or against Measure C? Mr. Ballot?
Yes, my name's Tom Belt, and I live at Hillview Place here, 1520. A couple of weeks ago, I approached the City Council and asked them to endorse this initiative, and I feel even more strongly about it today than I did a couple of weeks ago. I submitted a public records request to the city asking for the amount of silt in the bottom of our reservoir, and according to the most recent information we have, during some probing, we discovered that near the intake tower there is as much as 6 feet of silt in some of the areas around our intake tower, and that's directly related to the erosion that has occurred over the years. We've also looked at the every 5 years the city contracts to have the quality of the Bell Canyon Dam looked at and assessed, and there's been a continual decline in the amount of capacity that we have due to the silt erosion that's been taking place. So not only is this measure important for the entire county, I think it's particularly important for us here in St. Helena to recognize that that vineyard development, winery development in the watershed above Bell Canyon is very important to us. We need to make sure that it doesn't go get much bigger than it already is. If you were to look at those studies that have been done every 5 years, they recognize that the vineyard and winery development is the greatest threat to the integrity of Bell Canyon. So I would encourage you to support this yes on Measure C. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak for or against Measure C?
I'm Beth Novak-Milliken from Spotswood Winery and also a citizen of St. Helena, and I did speak also 2 weeks ago in support of Measure C, and I over the last 2 weeks, agreed and over time recognize the need for these protections in our ag watershed. We really do have something here worth protecting. I feel strongly about that, having been a relatively long-term resident of Napa Valley. So beyond just our own city, where I do think it's extraordinarily important, I think, for our county, and to set this example for other counties, I think we have just an immense opportunity to show that we are forward-thinking in how we view development in our ag watershed. And although I am a part of the wine industry and the grape growing industry, I do believe that we all in this industry have a responsibility to be responsible stewards and responsible farmers of our land, and to take care of what we have, and to be sensitive to what we have. So I very strongly hope that the St. Helena City Council will move to endorse Measure C. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comment?
George Kalianidis Kalistoga. If you drive north from San Helena, actually, or even further south, and you look to the right, you will see these partial slopes that have been denuded. There have been several surveys of what draws actually tourists to this county. Number one is wine, and the second reason is the beauty of the valley. So for people who say that it deprives, it reduces their property value, there is no limitation in taking oaks down to build a house, because that's a right. So we are talking about clearing large swaths of oak woodlands just to plant vineyards. And all the issues about water quality and siltation and so forth, yes, absolutely. But there is also this added consideration. So I urge you to vote yes for C. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment?
Again, good evening, Council and Mayor. C.O. Perez. I live actually not within the city limits, but where I do live is serviced by the water system that we have here in St. Helena. I was born and raised here in St. Helena, so I know what it was before and I know where we're going now. And I would encourage all of you to take steps in protecting the waters that are important and necessary in regards to our city. And Bell Canyon and the area above Bell Canyon is certainly important. I, too, support Measure C. I think it's being proactive in regards to take steps to protecting one of the major resources and necessary resources of any community, as well as the county. So I would encourage you to choose to support Measure C as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further public comment? Mr. Hackett?
Thank you, sir, for recognizing me. Thanks for giving the opportunity to speak tonight. I think that a couple of statistics, because typically city councils or board of supervisors love statistics and data, so I wouldn't dare miss out in giving you this one, that 66% of the water that's in the ag preserve comes from the ag watershed. 66%. 72% of that water goes to irrigate grapes. You guys have an incredible resource that you'd better protect here, because you serve the industry and your residents alike. You have tremendous power over this resource, this finite resource here in St. Helena. I think you better preserve it to the best of your ability. I'd also like to comment that when, as I'm sure all of you are aware, and informed citizens here, that we worked with the Napa Valley Vendors Association for over 7 months to craft this initiative. During that period of time, it went to their complete board and was given a unanimous up vote each time, including when we completed the document. We took that to Napa County to input it. At the same time, we took it to all the supervisors of Napa County individually. We went with a representative from the NVV and Jim Wilson and I representing the environmental side. Every supervisor was extremely glad that we were doing this. Every one of them. One said, I'm so excited about this. It gives me the cover I need that we're going to go out and we're going to enact this. We're not even going to put it on the ballot. And when we do, we're going to go out and do it in an oak woodland, not at the dais. So you see the extreme. Then when the NVV, when some loud voices got too loud, they backed away. The product is not different. The process is slightly different. I commend you for even bringing this up. If you stand up for Measure C here, you're standing up for your community in the best way you can at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, let me close public comment. I'm going to do something that I rarely do, which is to exercise my prerogative as mayor and go first. I've been an outspoken proponent of Measure C. I began to focus on watershed issues in 2015, fall 2015, not long after I became mayor. And I participated in drafting a comment letter leading to a draft environmental impact report that the city engineer sent to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection on September 2, 2015, relating to a proposed vineyard development in the Bell Canyon watershed. No mention was made in the DEIR that the development was in our watershed. That was most disturbing to me and to our city engineer. In the letter that was sent, we made two basic points. We wanted no increase in chemicals coming into our reservoir or in the watershed, and no reduction in the water supply. Why? We've suffered serious reduction in yield from Bell Canyon over the years, as well as degradation in water quality, as Mr. Belt has said. So my sense of it from that point forward was that existing regulations were not sufficient to protect our reservoir. When the final EIR came out, it did not address adequately the city's comments, and the city so noted. The next major event, though, for me was a memo dated April 4, 2016 from Joy Eldridge, Napa's Water General Manager, to the County Planning Department. That letter was a remarkable document for a bureaucrat to write, in my assessment. It contains a comprehensive review of the destructive impact of vineyard development on Lake Hennessy and the potential for such impact on Lake Milliken. The key line, and the county has been approving projects upstream from the city's municipal drinking water reservoirs in the mistaken assumption that erosion control plans prevent water quality impacts to the city's sources of drinking water supply. The letter describes in excruciating detail the degradation in water quality from vineyard development at Lake Hennessy over the years. It notes that Napa County, unlike us, owns significant acreage in the watersheds above both Lake Hennessy and Lake Milliken. And yet, it goes on, substantial evidence shows that such impacts are now degrading the city's Milliken and reservoir water source and already have been degrading the city's Hennessy reservoir water source. In other words, the protection that comes from acreage owned by the city of Napa around those reservoirs, which is well over 2,000 acres in each case, was not doing the job. And we have very minor acreage that we own and control above Bell Canyon. And so I supported the initiative in 2016. I carefully reviewed the well-accepted science at that time. I persuaded myself that the stream setbacks were well within best practices. I should add that I participated in a film clip that was widely shown, and that my support was well known to the wine industry at that time, that is for the 2016 initiative. And it seems to me it would have been obvious to anybody thinking about it that I was going to support Measure C. And then comes along the opposition ballot statement for Measure C. And the opponents managed to write that all mayors with a big capital M opposed Measure C. I can tell you I was disheartened by the opponents' advocacy. I found myself in the middle of a court case that should never have happened, and it obviously resulted in a revision of the opposition ballot statement wording. Now, I have to add here that in conversation with Measure C proponents, I've always said this measure needs to prevail on its own merits and not based upon the opposition's misconduct. Let me address briefly some of the opposition arguments. Science does not support Measure C. That issue has been very well addressed in letters in the Napa Register by scientists. And I would particularly cite the letter by Bill Primick, The Value of Oak Woodlands, that appeared in the Register on March 17, and he's a registered consulting arborist, and also the letter by Patrick Higgins that appeared in the Register on April 5. He's a fisheries and watershed scientist. I also thought that environmentalist Chris Balin did a very good review of the science in her letter of April 22. She had there a sentence that especially caught my eye. Our public reservoirs have been polluted with fertilizer runoff that feed algae blooms via runoff from vineyards. Like all of us, I've been exposed to the opposition arguments in the road signs. To me, without doubt, the most ludicrous one is Measure C will increase highway traffic on Highway 29. As David Heitzman stated in his May 3 Register letter, quote, the preservation of oak trees increases traffic on Highway 29, they say? Please Please imagine how that might work. I can't. The close runner-up, Measure C, costs taxpayers. It's not a tax measure. And then we have bad for farmers and several variants thereof. If that were true, please explain to me the strong public support of highly respected members of the industry, including the following here in St. Helena: Anomaly Vineyards, Beckstoffer Vineyards, Spotswood Estate Vineyard and Winery, Stratton Vineyards, Inc. These are just ones right here in the city of St. Helena. As for the property rights argument, again, and that's been much discussed in the paper. I won't go over the answers, but I thought the Stantons actually did a very good job in their March 30 letter, where they said, opponents of Measure C conveniently overlook one truth. Property owners countywide did give up some rights for formation of the Ag Preserve. Sometimes we have to consider the Commonwealth over individual rights, the benefits of the many over the few. It was certainly very effectively rebutted by Carl Bunch's first-rate letter in the May 3 Register, and also by Bill Hocker in his March 17 letter, and by Mr. Beckstoffer again in a letter in today's Register. Now, focusing for just a second on the editorial in the Napa Register, its first line is, quote, "We agree with almost all of what the backers of Measure C say. They plead for more time and for a legislative fix." My view of it is pretty simple. We're out of time, and we also cannot possibly contend, in light of the history that Mr. Hackett just recited, that any extension of time is going to result in a meaningful legislative fix. The need for greater watershed protection in the hills has been under discussion for years. It was obvious 2 years ago that there would be a 2018 ballot initiative in the absence of a new county ordinance. Good faith discussions took place with plenty of time to come to an agreement on a meaningful ordinance. They failed. We must deal with the here and now, and in my mind that means supporting Measure C. Or we're going to be faced with what other letters say, and what my colleague Mr. Ellsworth sometimes says too, that we would be condemned to the death of 1,000 cuts. So we have a resolution before the council. It focuses on Bell Canyon. It goes to the core issue as to why the city should support Measure C. And I see the issue very much as Lance Burris expressed it in his April 14th letter in the Register. Measure C is a modest first step in what must be an ongoing effort to conserve the legacy of hard-fought battles of the past. I don't think I could say it better than that. So that, I'm going to say in a nutshell, but it wasn't quite a nutshell, summarizes why it is that I support Measure C and why I've been so outspoken in my support in the last months. Does any other council member have something to say?
It would be helpful to read the resolution.
Yes, let me read the resolution. Resolution endorsing Measure C on June 5, 2018 ballot. Recitals. The City of St. Helena owns and operates Bell Canyon Reservoir. The Bell Canyon watershed is approximately 3,647 acres. The city owns just 140.7 watershed acres, including the reservoir. Bell Canyon Reservoir is the primary source of drinking water for the City of St. Helena. In consequence, it is essential that the Bell Canyon watershed be managed to protect the health and life safety of the residents of St. Helena. As elected leaders of St. Helena, we have a fiduciary duty to ensure the health and life safety of our city's residents. This duty includes doing our best to protect both the quality and quantity of water flowing into the reservoir from its watershed. Measure C establishes enhanced buffer zones around the watershed's creeks and small streams. At a time of increasingly stringent drinking water quality standards and customer expectations, these enhanced zones provide much-needed protection from chemical and sediment loading of the reservoir that adversely affect both the quality and quantity of stored water. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of St. Helena resolved to endorse Measure C. That's our proposed resolution. Yes.
I've got just a few brief comments, and I think what you said was excellent. Connecting the idea that Bell Canyon supplies our drinking water, that clean water and that access to it is also the basis of the equity in our home investments and our business investments. Without that water, without clean water, we put our investments at risk too, as well as our health. Another thing to understand is that the Napa River is the second largest freshwater inlet into the San Francisco Bay. So what goes into the water here, if it's industrial agricultural contamination goes into the water here, it goes down into the San Francisco Bay, and nutrient loads from fertilizers, and I believe even Roundup now they've realized can cause algae blooms, but that goes down into the water. So we have a responsibility to the communities below us, and also to the plant and animal life, the aquatic life in the river and the bay. A very quick thing to do is to go up to the intersection of Howell Mountain Road, Deer Park, and White Cottage Road. If you look to the south, you can see the watershed that feeds Lake Hennessy that serves 80,000 people in Napa. If you look to the north, you can see the watershed that feeds Bell Canyon, and you can see how delicate those watersheds are. If we can't protect the water at the top, it's not going to be protected. If it gets contaminated at the top, it's contaminated by the time it reaches our reservoir and our river. So I think this is a critical measure.
Ms. Coverstein?
I join in supporting this. I previously joined council members. I join in supporting this measure. I previously joined council members from Napa, American Canyon, Yountville, and Calistoga supporting Measure C. I do think it is a water quality issue, and I do believe we have a fiduciary duty, and I strongly support it.
Mr. Doring? Chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution that I read.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lupus?
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. That takes, please, no clapping. That takes us to Measure D. And with respect to Measure D, I have a disqualifying financial interest. My family owns the property that is adjacent on the south side to the Paul Malls property in Napa. My wife is a Coombs, and it's an old Coombs family property, and she has an interest in it today, and therefore, under the FPPC Act, I'm disqualified. So I'm going to leave the room, and I'll be out in the hallway to be recaptured once you get through the Measure D discussion, if that's okay.
Shall I take over and ask you to give a staff report, Mr. Manager?
Yes, thank you. As with Measure C, the following summary is taken from the impartial analysis. Measure D, if approved by Napa County voters, would amend the Napa County Code to largely eliminate personal use airports and heliports in zones other than airport districts. It would also require takeoffs in support of direct agricultural-related activities away from public airports, and must only transport persons essential to that activity and must be unavoidable. Measure D would also require that within 48 hours of any takeoff or landing in support of direct agricultural-related activities, that they file a report to the Director of the Napa County Planning, Building, and Environmental Services containing specific information about the takeoff or landing. Measure D does not change the county's code provisions allowing emergency medical services landing sites upon granting of a use permit.
Okay. I guess I should start by asking whether there are any initial questions from the council, either to our staff, or if our staff is not able to respond, then maybe somebody in the public could comment. Are there any questions that you want to raise at this point? I will open it to public comment, and I will do that right now. Is there any public comment?
George Kalianidis, I'm the sponsor of the initiative. the arguments against the initiative, one of the arguments is that there is no helicopter problem in the county, and that is correct. But we want to prevent it from becoming a problem, because if it does become a problem, we won't be able to do anything about it. Communities such as the Hamptons, Long Islands, the Hollywood Hills, the Cahuenga Pass, Torrance, California. I mean, the list keeps growing. And once many of those permits have been granted, there's just no way to go back. So we want to stop that. Regarding the Palmas application, which is one of the reasons why actually we put this initiative on the ballot, this one application has consumed 20% of the county's planning commission's time, over 1,100 hours of staff time. Imagine if we had 3 or 4 of these applications, and they are waiting in the wings. There are many people who actually use private helicopters on their properties without permits, and they would be coming out seeking for permits. Another argument that the argument against does is that that PG&E won't be able to replace power poles and service power lines, and Air Medical Services won't be able to provide emergency services. These are private. The initiative addresses private helipads, and those are defined as for the use of the owner, the family, and invited guests. PG&E and Air Medical Services are not the owners of the lands, they're not, nor the families, nor invited guests. They are completely different helicopters, and they use public sites rather than personal sites. So we want helicopters crash 43 times more often than fixed-wing aircraft, and the crashes occur, 37% of all crashes occur within 1 mile radius of a launching pad. So spreading these sites around the county multiplies the areas where you can have accidents. In 2017, up to March 12, 2018, there have been 24 crashes with 50 fatalities. Many more of those are not reported because they have no fatalities, but they fall on houses, they start fires, and I urge you to adopt Measure D. Thank you.
Thank you for your brief comments. Any other public comment?
Wasn't planning on it, but I'm Bobby Monette. I'm speaking as a citizen. A couple of things. I mean, there is a silver lining. There was one silver lining to global warming that I've experienced since I moved here 41 years ago, and that is that the DC-10 engines on the wind machines don't go off 30 times every spring. When I first moved here, I couldn't believe I didn't know what they were, and it was really hard to sleep. They started at 1 in the morning and went until it got warm, if it did. So they haven't gone off for a while, and I was thinking, oh no, the helicopters are coming. I thought we were rid of aerial noise pollution. And when I found out that, which I'm sure all of you know, but when I found out that once the pads are there, there's no regulation of these helicopters, because only the federal government can regulate the flying of these helicopters. So there would be no local control over how often, when, and so forth. And in addition to that, the disingenuous and misleading claims of the no on Measure D people is stunning to me, and I'm just hoping that will galvanize some support for it as well, because, that kind of, why can't we just have discourse, that kind of lying and disingenuousness is so undermining of our whole process. So anyway, I would ask you not to use the word lying, but disingenuous is a pretty good word. Okay. Just to be fair. I guess it's not true that PG&E and Rescue rescue helicopters would be able to come. That's not true. That's not true. But okay, I take back. Well, whatever. All right. The disingenuousness and misleading aspect of their propaganda, of their thoughts and support for their position.
Thank you. My only point on that is that I don't know if it's productive to cast aspersions or test people's motivations. I think you just look at the facts. People are smart enough to figure out what is going on. When you say the word lying, I think that's a little too strong, and so that's why I added that. And we can disagree on that, but that's my feeling on it. So, thank you.
CO Perez, and personally, the most upsetting part of the ballot argument against Measure D was the fact that it was one of the individuals we have elected. And I would hope that those individuals are doing their best to make sure that their comments are not just positive, but also true. I'm in support of Measure D. Again, I think it's important for all of our communities here in the county to protect the peaceful nature that we have throughout our county, and this is a step in that direction. Again, as Mr. Kalanides said, there's no current problem right now, but I think we can prevent a lot of things from happening by taking proactive steps, and I see Measure D as being a proactive step in regards to our quality of life that we have here, not just in St. Helena, but throughout the entire county. So I'd encourage you to endorse Measure D as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? Questions that may have arisen as a result of public comment?
I just have a few comments.
I'll just take a moment. I'll close the public comment and we can have council discussion. Go ahead, Jeff.
A couple quick points. For me, there's safety issues with having this sort of highly flammable fuel associated with helicopters in our rural areas. There's a fire risk when you're operating in an area that doesn't have emergency services close by. So I think there's a strong fire risk from the likelihood of crashes. Also disruption to not just the community, but also the animals. So you've got domestic animals, farm animals, and wildlife. When I was looking at this issue about 6 months ago, the noise issues, it's a concussive type of noise that can actually disrupt breeding, sleep cycles, and feeding, like feeding of young animals. So I think that the safety issues and the disruption to the community and also the animals in the area, to me, this is a good measure, and I would like to support it.
Councilmember Kuberstein, any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Kalanides for initially bringing this to our attention many months ago when the permit application was filed in the county, at which point the three of us who could vote on this, I believe, pushed along a letter expressing the concern of the city of St. Helena regarding proliferation or potential proliferation of private helipads. I mean, there's a time and a place for helicopters, hospital lifts, the fires. I mean, I think we all cheered the helicopters when they were here. PG&E. But I don't think we all want to live with that every day, and it would really change the character of our community. It's not just disruptive to animals, it's disruptive to people, and I strongly support Measure D.
I would like to echo Councilmember Kuberstein's thoughts. I admire you for your persistence, and thank you for bringing this forth. I am also a supporter of the measure. Frankly, it's just it's personal to me. When you hear a helicopter, and we've heard them in the last couple of days, they really do intervene in your life. And to me, it's just something that we can avoid. I was somewhat concerned about the exceptions that would be allowed, and I've come to the point of this question of owner, and what's private, what's not private. I think the lawyers are probably going to deal with that, but I think really the answer to that is who's going to enforce that. Are we going to enforce? Are we going to stop a PG&E helicopter from doing its work, or are we going to stop, somebody in the middle of a fire from doing their work? Who is going to stop that? So, whether that's a legal issue or not, and I have my own opinions about the clarity of it. That's okay. I think that the measure is something that's pretty consistent with what we're doing here in Napa County, and I do support it, and so I do thank you for that. So at this point, I would entertain a motion from either council member.
Well, I would move that we go on record in support of Measure D and ask the staff to prepare an appropriate resolution to be brought back at our next council meeting on the consent agenda.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There is a motion and a second.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes. We appointed you to the Helicopter Commission.
Thank you. Okay, next item is 10.4, discussion of capital improvement project C-82 downtown restroom project.
Thank you, Mayor.
Is it necessary to make a motion to reconsider this? Since we voted on this at the last meeting.
Good.
We should just make the motion and not going to kill us. The next meeting.
What I would recommend is that you table this item and go to another one. I'm going to look at the City Council's reconsideration rule. You have a policy on that, and I can answer that question, but I can't answer it until I review that rule.
Well, I'm happy to make the motion. I did vote in favor at the last meeting of the item that was on the table, I believe, was to send out the bid package.
So the reconsideration rule, both in your rules and in Robert's Rules of Order, typically has two components. One of them is that the motion, a motion needs to be made by, as you know, a member who voted in the majority. I think it would moot the question if in fact you were a member who voted in the majority and you want to reconsider this. Out of an abundance of caution, that would be an appropriate procedure for the council to follow for this meeting. That would be fine.
All right. I move that we reconsider this item.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Reluctant, yes.
So briefly, this was approved at the construction bid package was approved at the last meeting, authorizing staff to seek construction bids, and after that meeting, there were some citizen concerns raised, and I was contacted by several council members, and we've prepared this report tonight to provide you additional background on the project's design features, budget, and history, and also to ensure that the City Council is comfortable proceeding to bid with the project's current specifications. And a history of the project is attached to the report, along with preliminary design renderings and complete plans, and staff is available to answer questions.
Okay. Let me open the public hearing. Does anybody in the public wish to comment on this? Mr. Park?
Good evening. I'm Joshua Park. I'd love to talk about toilets here this evening. I understand the city's been after this for quite a while, and it's a need for the community. I have a couple concerns I just want to bring up. One, if any of you have used the facilities at Crane Park in the heat of the summer. Unconditioned restrooms are more appropriate for some places than others, and we're asking patrons of our businesses to walk down an alley and use a restroom that's of the same climate as the exterior. I think that's should be frowned upon. It's my opinion, but if we're asking people to come spend money in our town and we're building this for the business community, I think we could do better in that regard. The other is the design aesthetic is a design that was originally implemented for a eucalyptus forest. And I understand the desire to use green materials like the watershed, I think it is watershed block, the Napa purveyor of the block. But to lift the design verbatim with the beige and tan block, same bond pattern, reclaimed wood for the roof structures, and then put it in a parking lot, it's a design that's appropriate for a forest and inappropriate for a parking lot. I think that as long as we're building this custom and we're not buying something kit, we could do better for its setting. And the other concern I have is the cost of the project for unconditioned space and the location. It seems like it's money that could better serve a different location and a conditioned space. I think you'll find out when you get bids back how much room there is to breathe there, but asking people to walk down an alley to use an outdoor restroom in the parking lot versus doing something like renovating the kitchen space in Carnegie basement, it seems like money that could be saved and better used.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comment?
Thank you.
I'll close public comment. Any further council comment?
Well, I thought we should discuss this and take Joshua's comments into consideration. I know we need public restrooms, but I would hope that we can do them in the most inviting and efficient manner possible. I am concerned about the unconditioned space. Pretty cold for many months of the year and extremely hot in other times. And if there was a way to do this in an enclosed building where we could condition the space, I think it would be a better solution. I'm happy that the Chamber of Commerce has moved to Main Street and we're going to have 2 restrooms in a building. And I think we should explore the suggestion of looking at our own Carnegie building and trying to provide the restrooms within the building. I'm also concerned about the loss of parking spaces, frankly. We're having a lot of discussion about parking, and we're going to undertake our own parking study. And we will lose 2 parking spaces in this lot, which is heavily utilized as far as I can see. And if we could avoid that, I think it would be a good outcome. I am also concerned about the cost, as I have been from the very beginning. And this is not to try to undermine staff's effort. They've been working on this in good faith. And I don't think the choice is to, I can't remember what we were told we could do here. I would suggest that we pause on putting out the bid package and at least do some preliminary investigative analysis of whether we could do this in the Carnegie building. I don't want to spend months and months on it, but I think it's worth some time to see if there is another solution that doesn't lose parking, costs the same or less, and is more welcoming to tourists and frankly more accessible, I think, there off of Adams Street than what we are prepared to do.
I think the point that that struck me was the unconditioned point, where we're looking at this, and I think we were all realizing we needed to do something, and not being experts in the field, not really understanding it until it was pointed out. So, and the fact that the chamber has moved into town, and it's my understanding that the restrooms are open now to the public at the chamber. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off to get something in right away. So if looking at the Carnegie building, if this money could be spent there and also fix the elevator at the Carnegie building, if there's enough funding, and I'm with Mary, I don't think we want to take forever dragging it out, but if we look at a couple different options, one is what would it take to do a site-specific conditioned restroom in the parking lot, and I am concerned about the parking too, but also to examine Carnegie and see if that's an option, and if the restrooms at the Carnegie building and the chamber provide what the downtown merchants need and have been asking for, and certainly people, Anna at Anna's Cantina has said we need something so not everybody in town doesn't come to our restroom. So we need something, but maybe it's time to think about this a little bit, give it a little bit of thought. We have a little bit of breathing room because the chamber's got some restrooms open in town. So I think looking at it, taking a little time to look at some options would be good.
Mr. Noring?
I don't want to get into the design area because that's not my field. I am concerned about the conditioned and unconditioned space. I don't know enough about what improvements can be made now to make that change. Frankly, I don't think that the Carnegie building is the panacea. I think we need even more bathrooms than these proposed bathrooms all throughout our parks and our public spaces. For me, I don't know, just some common sense. When I was a young father and I went into a town, usually they have to go right when you get into the parking lot. They're right there. And so for me, it's a common sense thing. If I have a 3-year-old kid, we're getting out of the car, hey, look, that's a nice bathroom. Now the question is it nice? I know that Joshua has years of experience and design expertise that I don't have. My concern is that businesses have been clamoring for this for years, and you don't have any business people coming saying, yeah, we don't want that. Certainly I don't want to see a situation where we're embarrassed, where it's very hot or very cold, and I think the staff report got to that issue. I'm listening to one argument that said, no, that's not going to be a problem because it's shaded and there will be enough ambient airflow, and then there's others who are saying, hey, that was meant for eucalyptus grove somewhere in some forest, and it's not going to work. So I don't have enough background to judge that one way or another. If we were to pause, I think I would rather have a pause to work on the design of this restroom where it is, rather than pausing to necessarily look into Carnegie. I think we can still continue to have a proposed project for Carnegie at some point. I think we need both, frankly. I think we have a dearth of bathrooms, and I think people are going to be coming from either walking downtown, entering from the parking lot. It's also not just for visitors, it's for us, young families who are running around town and parking there. They may be coming from the school on their way. The child has to go. So, I don't know, maybe I'm more of a practical thinker, and having raised 2 children, that's what comes to my mind. More bathrooms are better. We should be doing Carnegie and this building. But I am concerned that it's getting hotter here. We have climate change. It's not going to get cooler. It is a nice space. I went over there before I went to this meeting and just sat in the parking lot for a while and just kind of got my feel for it. It's a beautiful space anyway. I think this notion of walking through the alleyway, I think that, frankly, I don't agree with that as a detractor. I think that could be a beautiful entryway into the parking area and into the downtown. It isn't right now. It doesn't look very nice, but it can be very nice if we spend some time on it. So, look, this is not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about at night, so I'm willing to listen to the council, but I do think we need bathrooms. We need more parking. We need another parking lot. We need to get the PG&E parking lot or other parking lots to replace this parking. So, I'm willing to listen to all sides of this. I don't know what the issue is. One of the things that struck me from my own background, my own understanding, is a question for Public Works. In the staff report, it talks about the men's room and the women's room. And to be honest with you, that kind of grates me a little bit, because my understanding is that these are gender-neutral, family-oriented bathrooms. And then I went back and looked, you can't really read the plans, frankly, in our report. You'd have to get online, and I didn't have a chance to do that, but I've read them. And so there's a little bit of a conflict when frankly, I have a particular concern about the transgender community. And when someone comes up to a bathroom and they see men and women, it's not good. We need to get past that. And I understood from the past report that we received in April was that it was supposed to be gender neutral. So I'm not sure what's going on there and what the difference is, and why they can't just be the same bathroom with this, you have one or the other and they're pretty much the same. I'm not sure what's going on there from a sort of a design or technical or legal perspective. So that's a long-winded question, but I want to make sure that these are gender neutral. And then what the difference is, what design aspects triggered someone to say, well, this is the men's bathroom and this is the women's bathroom.
I'm not sure where you're reading that. Is it in the attachments or in the staff report?
Page 332 under water efficiency, and then in the design itself it says the men's room and the women's room.
That was supposed to be changed. It is gender neutral. It's a condition of the project through Plan Commission. It has to be as part of the code. So I'm not sure where I was seeing that, because we caught that as well on the plans.
What is going to be in both bathrooms? Are they going to look the same, or how is that? I mean,
there was discussion about an extra urinal in the second structure, but they were both going to be posted. They have to be posted as code as gender neutral. So. There's a urinal in one.
Well, they both need urinals, that's for sure.
Well, just speaking as a woman, I'd wonder if I was in the wrong place.
But there is also, I want to address that there is no loss of parking stalls. We do have to bring it up to ADA compliance. Right now, the parking lot is not. So regardless of the structure going in the parking lot, we have to get a van accessible parking stall in there. So we have to lose one parking stall. But the project does not take any parking.
Took two.
Nope. Originally, the project started with the EV charging stations. That was done outside of this project. Mm-hmm. But we have to bring it up to ADA accessibility regardless of a building going in place. So that's part of our ADA transition plan.
We do. You have been working with a local architect as well, right?
Correct, Valley Architect Tom. We had requested his appearance here this evening, but I don't see him.
He had a conflict at 5:30, but was planning to stop by after.
I mean, I think it would be worthwhile to see if he was willing to just give us some advice about two concepts. First of all, the unconditioned nature of this, whatever you want to call it, public restroom, and also the possibility of the Carnegie space, and what it would take and what it would cost and how quickly it could be done. Personally, I'd be in favor of moving ahead faster on the Carnegie space and providing people with something that's conditioned, and then perhaps later we add this. For what it's worth, I did get one comment from a local business person who said he would offer his restroom to people before he would send them, back to use this one. So I'm not sure it's obvious to everybody that this is even going to be in this location. Enough said.
Presumably there'll be signage, but just a couple of quick comments. I'm deeply skeptical that the Carnegie Building basement is an appropriate place for a public restroom. That the access, it seems to me, presents real difficulties from an ADA point of view, and it's a down ramp, and I don't think it would be at all pleasant walking down there and into the basement of the building to a restroom. But be that as it may, I'm also with respect to the unconditioned restroom, I'm a cyclist. I go down to Yountville. I use the restrooms at Veterans Park. There are two of them. They're unconditioned. I've used them at all times of the year, and I've never felt the slightest discomfort in those restrooms, and I see no reason why an unconditioned restroom would not work there. And also, quite frankly, at this point, given the very long time this has been under discussion and the importance of these restrooms to our business community, and Anna Cantinas was specifically mentioned, I just think it's time for the council to move forward with respect to these bathrooms. That's my view of it. So, at this point, I suppose if there's a motion to pause, it should be made and see whether it carries 3 votes. If it ties 2-2, then I'll continue the meeting until until Councilmember White gets back. Is that
and I would like to make a motion attached to the idea that we're moving quickly to look at this. I don't want to hold it up for too long either, but I do think there are very valid points that were brought up.
I'd prefer to have a motion that didn't tie it to the Carnegie Building. I think that's a separate issue that should come forward on its own merits and not tied to this issue, in my mind. I think they're different issues. They're related, obviously, to some degree, but I mean, you can squint at me, but I'm just telling you what my feelings are. Hint.
Well, what if we amend your motion to pause, investigate the cost of making this conditioned space? I am concerned about it. I am concerned about how welcoming it would be to people who are going to use it. And
second.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Avopoulos? So pause to look at whether it should be conditioned space
and cost
at the current site.
Councilmember Coberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Maybe the SHAPE committee will bring up the Carnegie Building.
Okay. Next one is consideration proposed approval of a resolution adopting the 5-year capital program. Ms. Smithies.
Yes, thank you. We were here back in August of last year, and we have an updated plan. I'm waiting for our presentation PowerPoint to load up here. In short, well, I'll just wait till the project comes up. Some of it you'll go over more thoroughly tomorrow, with especially the new requests for funds for some of the new projects at our budget hearing tomorrow. Here we go. All right. So this is for our 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal year 2019 through 2023. Introductions, a 5-year programming document, maintain improved city infrastructure. We're looking still at about $40 million over the next 5 years. The 4 categories that we have CIP projects are in civic, streets, wastewater, and water. Since we just did come back through and you have all the projects in front of you in the CIP with your packet, I just wanted to highlight the new projects that are being added in fiscal year 19, pending the budget sessions and approval, capital improvement expenditures. Lyman Park improvements and rehabilitate the Crane Park tennis courts. These were projects that were brought to us as recommendations from the Recreation Committee. And we don't have specific cost estimates for it, so we just kind of put a number to them for design this coming year until we have more substantial information on them, and utilizing park impact fees. In addition, we have our first year of pavement restoration. We're calling it R1979. It's also an annual pavement restoration, but each year moving forward, we'll do a new project number and solidify the streets we're going to do in that construction year. So that way that we know what funds we're getting from Measure T, and we can really utilize what projects we know we can move forward with that year with those funds and construct accordingly. 1901 for streets is Stormwater Master Plan. This will be part of the Master Utility Integrated Utility Master Plan that's currently under review for selection of consultants. We're requesting $100,000 in general fund money to move that portion of the plan forward. It may come in less. And then we have the Hunt Avenue Sidewalk Gap Closure, which was an approved street expenditure project with Measure T. Sulphur Creek Erosion Repair. This is something that came up with our Year 7 monitoring of our flood control project. We have a minor erosion area adjacent to the opening of the Napa River, Sulphur Creek. We have fund money in there and an account. $50,000 a year go in there, I believe. So we have enough funds in there to move forward design and getting those repairs made this coming fiscal year. The next project, Sulphur Creek sediment removal. This is something that was brought up recently near Valley View. We're currently working with the county flood control district, as well as the regulatory agencies and Harold Smith to see how much we can get done this coming year, what needs to be done, and whether or not we can get permits. We requested initially $10,000, I believe. We're going to request $100,000 total into that account or less, but we can hear more about that tomorrow. And the Grayson and South Crane rehab, we're not funding anything yet in fiscal year 19. It's part year 2 of Measure T funds, but we're adding that to the list as a separate project because it is something that we would like to move forward on. If funds become available in 18-19, we could possibly start sooner, but that will be rolled out in fiscal year 19-20. And then here's just a summary of the projects by project category. Civic streets, you have about $882,000 over 5 years. Streets, 10.5, but in the first fiscal year, $2 million. Water, 2.6 for fiscal year 18-19, and wastewater, 1.6 for a total of 6.9 for 18-19. A lot of these funds have already been transferred in. The new funds will be civic and street funding. And then here's just a summary of the projects for Civic: downtown restrooms, ADA transition plan, Lyman Park, rehabilitate Crane Park tennis courts, and then we have streets, a whole list of street projects and some storm work projects. Water projects, most of these you've all seen before recently. They're all part of the rate study. Nothing new there. And the wastewater, the same. Oops, it clicked forward too fast. What happened there? There we go. How do I get back into it? Are there any questions, or did I go too fast through it?
I have a question about Lyman Park.
Okay.
The description says it'll rehabilitate the park and the bathrooms. $50,000 is listed for design work. So exactly what would happen next year if we appropriate $50,000?
This speaks to the concept of bringing in a landscape architect. And so this is not funding from the general fund, but from fees that are available. And so recognizing that the SHAPE Committee is currently talking about this, that recommendations will be passed to the council, I think the council has flexibility on whether this appropriation is made in the next fiscal year or beyond, just depending on timing. But the first step, as we've envisioned it, is to bring in an architect and work with ideas related to integration with whatever building is on the City Hall site in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly support upgrading the bathrooms in there pronto. I tend to think that the landscape architect is a little bit premature until we know what building is going to be on the City Hall site, and I would suspect that whoever is working on the design of that building would maybe be working on the landscape architecture and coordinating it with Lyman. So it's hard for me to imagine that we're actually going to get there within a year. I'm all for the bathrooms, however.
I think the other concept, just speaking of bathrooms briefly, is that if that site is a new City Hall, the bathrooms could be integrated into the building, and so there may not need to be in the park site, and so there may be a need or an interest in pausing on where bathrooms go down the road.
They could use a little upgrading for not a lot of money, I would think.
I'll just make a comment to that. Is that I think that's a pretty good point. That if this is Lyman's going to be integrated somehow in a new building, that if we spend some money to make sure that it's maintained and upgraded, and as well as the bathrooms, putting a little energy and upgrade into them, but knowing that things are going to change, hopefully in a not too long period, that we don't do too much and go in a different direction if we're going to have to go back. So I think that's a good point Mary made.
Are you suggesting that we redirect that $50,000 for some basic upgrading of that Lyman Park bathroom on a temporary basis? I'm just asking the question.
If we see that we're going to be at a point in this fiscal year where we're actually going to be getting into landscape design of the park.
We also do have a sewer lateral issue. We had it originally on maintenance for last year's or this fiscal year, and we passed it to this year, and that's why we say the bathrooms, because there is a flat line there. It does back up on occasion and go over the sidewalk next to City Hall.
Is that a charge to the wastewater fund if it's a sewer lateral as opposed to the general fund?
I would assume so.
Yes.
Okay. I just saved a few dollars for the general fund.
The bathroom project can be used. It can also access the fees. So if there was an interest in looking at modest upgrades to the existing bathroom, then that's something that we could do near term.
Yeah, I think that would be good too. Okay, any other comments? Any public comment here? I think we've exhausted the public, so I'll close public comment.
Yeah, all this bathroom talk.
I'm trying to keep my conversation out of the sewer. All right. So, knowing that nothing is cast in stone, what's the action here? To approve this 5-year capital improvement program, knowing that it's subject to subsequent readjustment as matters move forward? Is that where we are?
That would be correct.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the 5-year?
By the way, did you finish your presentation? Is there anything else you wanted to add? I think you got cut short, but maybe I'm mistaken.
I think it just jumped from questions to closure on the presentation.
I just want to preempt your thunder.
That's okay.
That's all right. Yeah, no, since we recently just went through all this, I think you're all really well apprised to all the utility projects, the street projects. We've kind of come up again and again the last couple of months on all the proposed street projects, and you're going to get a lot more of it tomorrow.
All right. Well, the chair would accept a motion to accept the staff recommendation. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yes.
The staff recommendation, I believe, is to review and provide direction, if I'm reading this correctly. So we would need more specific direction than the... Am I reading the wrong one? Okay, good. Good, thank you. I was off by one.
What further direction do you want?
No, I'm sorry, I was looking at 10.4 instead of 10.5.
I've exhausted the city manager, too.
So moved on that.
With the minor change?
Sort of change in scope on the Lyman to take care of your issues.
So you want me to revise Lyman in the actual budget document to reflect just the bathrooms, Lyman improvements?
Whatever way is appropriate. We just didn't think that spending $50,000 on a landscape architect is prudent at this early stage, that it would be better served to kind of get the park upgraded. It may not need $50,000, on a temporary basis. It could be half that, but my understanding is that's what Mayor was thinking, to redirect that landscape architect money and use it to do some short-term temporary fixes or upgrades at that.
To the bathrooms.
Yeah, and I'm recognizing you said that there's a lateral issue too, so I don't know if that has to be taken care of.
Lyman Park bathroom improvements?
Yeah, sure.
Just to modify the title change, and then how about, I did notice there was a typo on one of the stormwater utilities. I'm just going to make that minor change. I think I reused stormwater instead of changed it to water on one of the, so.
All right, so
Okay.
At this point, we have a motion, a second.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Doreen?
I don't think anybody seconded it.
Oh, I'm
Second.
sorry, I got-
Second,
I
yes.
did-
Okay.
Okay. Doreen?
Second, and yes.
Overstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Smithies. And let me go back and see where we are. Consideration and proposed approval resolution adopting, that was 10.5. Yeah, so now we're at 10.6. Consideration approval resolution approving City of St. Helena City Council policy on management of legal services.
Mr. Mayor, for obvious reasons, because my law firm will be affected by this matter, I'm going to step out into the hall.
All right.
And Mayor, I've caught up. I recognize we're now on 10.6.
Okay, good.
So briefly, Councilmember Doring recently requested the City Council consider establishing a city policy on the management of its legal services. And this was to ensure the city receives and manages its general legal and litigation services in accordance with best practices. And as a result, a working group of Councilmember Doring and the mayor worked together to draft a recommended policy that's before you tonight. The proposed policy would formally establish policies related to the appointment and duties of the city attorney, litigation policies and procedures, billing, and other matters. And I'll invite Councilmember Doring or the mayor to add any additional context to the work you've done.
Mr. Doring?
I'm not sure if that's necessary. I think if you read the policies, if there are questions about the policy, I'd be happy to answer them to the extent I can. But no, I don't think there's anything more we need to add.
To me, these reflect best practices tailored to the needs of our city, and I don't think in the profession would be viewed as hugely controversial. Any further comment? Let me open the public hearing. Any public comment on this? Mr. Hopoulos, if you look at just scan on the left-hand side in a couple places, you'll see some errant words that have gone outside the margins that need to be fixed when it gets reset. But okay, apart from that, let me see if...
I have a question on page 462 under billing statements. The last item 11 says billing should be submitted monthly, but must be submitted no less than quarterly, unless no activity has occurred. It seems to me that's an invitation to bill quarterly. And I don't know why we don't just require monthly billing, unless no activity.
11.
It's also on page 512 in the amended agenda.
Oh. I think monthly billings, enable us to keep on top of what's happening, and it seems to be customary practice in law firms, getting your bills out. I don't think it would impose any additional work on our attorney.
I hesitate to comment because I've been having trouble getting my bills out on a monthly basis. I'm working on it. My concern on that, actually, it does raise a question. There are times when we have our quarterly financial reports, and that issue is always sort of dragging a little bit behind. So it's like, well, we don't know because the bills haven't come in, and we're addressing a quarterly report, but that's one area that seems to be repeated where the bills aren't in, and so we don't quite know what to make of that. So I don't know. Is there any suggestion from our staff, I guess, would be a question I have.
Our attorney does currently bill us monthly, so we do get monthly billing statements, but they have about a 1 month lag time. So you have your February bills. We actually don't. They put everything together. We don't get the February bills until April, and so we do get them on a monthly basis, but for the quarterly staff reports, because there's a 1 month lag time, but we do receive them on a monthly basis.
Monthly, but not for the prior month.
Not for the prior month, for the previous month. So we receive them on a monthly basis, but it's a 1 month lag time.
Actually, 2 months, isn't it? You said for a February, so somebody did work in February, when would we get a bill for that?
Usually by April 2nd.
Okay, so that's different. That's 2 months.
Well, this raises an interesting separate issue of, how much lag time can there be? Bills could come in monthly, but they could relate to 6 months ago, work 6 months ago. It seems to me they should be timely, and monthly, if possible. I mean, I know you're a small law firm, but law firms, they crawl all over you to make you get your billing out. It's part of the job. And I think it allows us to keep abreast of what's going on, or I should say the manager who will be reviewing the bills.
How do you think we should restate that? I'm happy to, the bills should come in 30 days after the work is done, or something like that? I don't know.
I think so.
That's not artful, but I'm getting to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess what you would say is bills should be submitted monthly and should be received within 30 days after the close of the month.
Yep, that works.
I mean, all right.
I've got two
Yeah.
comments. The first one, I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it, but I have this, I'm just wondering, is it having somebody like Tom work directly for the city rather than for a firm that we contract with? My thought on that is that if we have somebody who's working for salary for the city, then we know we have an idea of what the price is, the known price, and then do we then have more access? If they're working for the city for a salary, can we call upon them whenever we have a question and not worry how much we're going to be charged? I'm just wondering if there's a different model that works in other cities where an attorney works directly for the city, and if there are any benefits to that. That's one question. I don't know if this is the place to talk about that, or if this is...
We need Tom to address that.
There are cities like the city of Napa that have an in-house legal staff, and they also go outside the city for specialized services. But I'm clear in my own mind that our city is too small to support an in-house full-time in-house lawyer, and also I'm absolutely persuaded that an in-house full-time lawyer, no matter how competent, would not have anything like the range of access to the support that we need in the very different areas of potential legal issues and litigation in which we find ourselves. So I don't see that it's a practical model for us, and this policy was really written in the context of employing a contract lawyer like Mr. Brown's firm. And if we were to go down another route in the future, then the policy, to my way of thinking, would really have to be completely rewritten. That's where my head is. And so this was to deal with the situation which we are in currently, and I would urge you to stick with that.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor's comments. I think that's right. But I think that's a discussion for another time. If we ever have to do an RFP, it would be what is in the RFP and how do we structure it and what kinds of things are we looking for, or we decide, we don't want to do that and we want to have an in-house employee, and then we do that. But I think these are pretty much addressing current practices, so it doesn't foreclose that from happening in the future. I frankly have reservations about having an employee attorney for the reasons that the mayor has suggested, and I think I don't think I mean, we can explore what other cities do, but I don't think it's common for small cities to have a lawyer that has all of the different kinds of skills that are required. You typically see a outside contracted law firm with all kinds of different attorneys.
Okay. And the other area I want to just bring up for a minute is in negotiation. If our attorney is negotiating with prospective businesses coming into town, how do we determine that how that negotiation happens? I'll just use an example of the Behringer issue. By the time it came to the city council, we were told that the council was precluded from voting on or commenting on the water issues. And to me, that at some point there was a negotiation between somebody and the applicant about what was happening. And to me, for an elected official to not have the ability to make a comment on something as critical as water, I'm wondering where in the negotiation we lost that ability. And so I would want to find some way of knowing that in negotiation that we're making sure we have controls in place to not lose leverage in negotiation. And I don't know if this is the appropriate place for that, but I do want to make sure that as things go forward, we know we're always working towards having, not letting leverage slip away or making sure it's a council decision when it comes to leverage.
Well, doesn't that go to what we can do in closed session? It's obviously the duty of the city manager to bring to our attention for guidance issues of significance, and if they require attorney advice, then the way to handle that is through closed session. But I don't think it's appropriate for this type of policy to try and address that. I think at the end of the day there, you're relying on the good faith judgment of the city manager, and of course, if a member of the council gets wind of anything, it's cause a discussion with the city manager and a scheduling of a closed session. That's the way I kind of see it. If appropriate under the Brown Act, I don't always have that problem.
I see it a little bit differently than you, Mayor. I think that these policies actually do address that because there's a lot more reporting, there's a lot more interaction with the council. We're going to get a lot more feedback. I think there's sort of protocol set in place where, negotiation, we have our lawyer has to understand what it is that the council is directing, and hopefully these policies will ensure that. And there's going to be an annual or biannual evaluation. If our council's not doing that and going off the rails and doing something that we don't want within legal reason, then that's going to be reflected in an evaluation. So I think the more interaction and communication that we have with our council will help with those situations. I don't necessarily agree with your premise that it was a negotiation, first of all, but I understand your point that a lawyer should be negotiating based on the direction it receives from its client, and we are the client.
And these policies, as you're saying, will give us more of that interaction. That's great, because I think that's where I'm going to.
Yeah, and I didn't really mean to imply differently, but there's a section here that deals with significant strategy decisions that I think makes the point, and it's probably made elsewhere. All right. At this point, then, with the change, any further public comment? No? With the change in item 11, did you get that? So it would read, billing should be submitted monthly and should be received within 30 days after the close of the month. With that change, is there a motion to accept the policy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Soring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay.
A follow-up comment regarding the evaluation. I do think we should get off on the right foot here and schedule an evaluation. We also need to evaluate our manager. These are the two people that report to the council, and I'd like to schedule those soon,
All right.
when it's convenient.
We have the managers planned for May 22nd, so
Good.
we'll have part of the next closed session will be my evaluation.
Can you recirculate that form? Are you going to recirculate?
I will, and
Can we
also a summary.
Can we recapture our city attorney, please?
Is there a form? Did you come across a form for evaluating the city attorney, or
I haven't looked for one, but I certainly can try to
should
find
probably
something. Yeah.
work on that? Okay.
We're almost there, Mayor.
Listen, I had a comfort break. The rest of you haven't. Okay, 10.7, introduction and first reading of an ordinance granting the city manager authority to execute settlement agreements, waive otherwise applicable fees and penalties up to $2,000, and resolve appeals subject to Chapter 1.16 of this code and other disputes involving city codes. Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the introduction and first reading of a proposed ordinance. And in the last 9 months, I've had a few items come across the desk that seem to be relatively minor in nature, that otherwise can only go to the council for consideration review. One example was the traffic ticket that was appealed to the council. We've had another issue related to a building permit, and so we've put together a proposed ordinance here that would provide some flexibility to the manager to resolve disputes, waive minor fee issues up to $2,000, and reach settlement agreements. And so I've worked with the city attorney on drafting an ordinance that would anticipate a few different scenarios. And so that's what this is intended to do. The point of this effort is to save time and hopefully accelerate an expedited solution to various issues that seem that they are able to be resolved at the staff level.
Okay,
and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, let me open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any council comment? I'll entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. And that takes us to 10.8. Discussion of establishing a working group to review and make recommendations to possible amendment to the nonprofit program. Is there a staff person that's going to speak to that? Ms. Schmitz?
Yes, I will go ahead and speak to this. This was following our discussion last council meeting regarding the nonprofit funding applications. So as we are aware after the last meeting that there are some areas within the current policy that could probably stand for some revision. So we are asking for council direction on establishing a work group to review and make recommendations to possibly amend the nonprofit grant funding for next fiscal year's grant cycle. So it'd be for fiscal year 1920. We are looking at potentially having two council members work with Mandy Kellogg, who administers our grants for the city. She's our staff member. The other two items is approving a resolution. One is to fund the 17 nonprofit grant awards for fiscal year 1819. So it will be $133,700 from the general fund and $10,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then further approving a resolution waiving the $1,500 city permit fees for the Velima Foundation for the nonprofit project outlined in the grant application. And in the $133,700, the $1,500 has been removed from their initial grant application. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any initial questions? Any public comment? I don't see any public comment. I think the action item here really is to find two council members willing to serve in terms of taking a look at our policy and revising it. And I don't think the mayor can escape that escape volunteering, since the mayor's duty, among other duties, is to review the application, so I'm in it. And I would suggest that Mr. Doring join me on this one. That's satisfactory to everybody?
Yes, I do have some comments. Can I submit them to the group?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be fine.
Okay.
Through the city manager.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Okay.
I think we're leaving out our biggest nonprofit that we grant money to, which is the Chamber of Commerce, and I would hope that this policy encompasses that funding as well.
Okay.
I think that they should be as transparent in their requests as we require all of these other entities to be, which would include, full financial statements. We did talk about, maybe there are some organizations in town that are worthy of more than the 10,000, given the type of work they are doing, which normally might be a city function. And, I think the chamber is in that group. But it's always bothered me that we consider one group one way and we consider another differently. So I would hope that this working group would take that into consideration.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a long history that explains why that happened, and I have no idea why. But I'd be happy to look at that.
Thank you.
And happy to serve. I think I volunteered last time. I'm sorry. Yes, I would say yes.
Good. So we have two victims serving on this, and we have, I think, no further discussion with respect to it. And so at this point, I'll declare the meeting adjourned.
Actually, I need the resolutions.
We have to.
Oh, we're going to do that before the budget, huh?
I thought we already did that. Okay. All right. Then I'll accept a motion to accept the staff recommendation with the proviso that as to the subcommittee, it's myself and Mr. Doring.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Avopoulos.
Councilmember Aylesworth?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Coberstein.
Yes.
Now Doring.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Okay. That hits the end of the book. Thank you very much, everybody. And it is 9 o'clock. That's pretty reasonable for this meeting. I thought it would go longer.